It is insane, and that's actually what it's called. It's called verrückt, which is German for insane.
The latest on the 10-year-old boy killed at a Kansas water park on what is known as the world's tallest water slide. That slide now closed as we learn new details about the tragedy.
And a man was injured Saturday evening when he fell off a ride at Lagoon.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sydney, and if you're new here, this is just a place where we can talk about true crime, spooky, scary stories, dark history, or anything else I got going on in my brain. This is my second time recording this because I forgot to hit record on my audio, which is very on par for me. I should stop recording when I have no sleep. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about amusement park accidents. And this is something that I'm really interested in, even though it's an extremely dark topic. I think it's extremely interesting. So I thought that we would talk about a couple of different amusement parks that have had gruesome and disturbing accidents. So for your discretion advised, it might get a little bit dark. I'm going to try to keep it light, but yeah. Let's talk about some amusement park accidents. Schlitterbahn, Kansas City first opened its gates in July of 2009. They're actually a Texas-based company, and they began building this water park in 2007. When the park first opened, it had 12 water attractions, including tube slides, mat slides, and different pools. And they were actually planning to build a 1,000-room resort on the property as well. But when the 2008 recession hit, they kind of scrapped those plans. But the water park was extremely popular. Some of the most notable rides at Schlitterbahn, Kansas City included the Torrent River, which was the world's largest tidal wave river. And so it included kind of these ocean-sized tidal waves mixed with a lazy river. So it was kind of fun for the whole family because everybody would just love that shit. Storm Blaster was another extremely popular ride, especially with the adrenaline junkies, because it combined the feel of a roller coaster with a water slide. It would start off with a 3-story drop, followed by lots of different smaller drops, and super fun. I've been on a similar ride. That shit's gold. But the most wild and popular attraction at Schlitterbahn, Kansas City had to be verrückt. And if you don't know, verrückt actually means crazy or insane in German, and we will just find out how fitting that name is in a moment here. The idea for verrückt was born out of the mind of co-owner of the park, and his name was Jeff Henry. He came up with this idea in 2012, and he pitched it to a lot of different vendors trying to get somebody to help him construct this ride, but they all declined. So he decided that he would go off on his own and build verrückt. And if you've seen my video on the Great Molasses Flood, then you know about Arthur Gell. And people like Arthur Gell and Jeff Henry really think that they can just be engineers without knowing anything about engineering. It's not going to end well, is what I'm saying. So Jeff Henry wanted to have this thing up and running by 2013. So with only a year, really, to make this idea a reality, he had his team working on the calculations, the designs, day in, day out, all the time. He was working these people to the bone, and he had them build up these plans in about 5 weeks. And just as a comparison, usually these plans take 5 to 6 months, but he somehow got his team to push out all this stuff in 5 weeks. And honestly, a lot of what Henry and his team did was just basic trial and error. And he was actually on a show called Extreme Water Parks, where he was shown doing a lot of these testings, and it didn't seem like an exact science to me. He would just put that raft on there and be like, go. And he would just kind of tweak his plans from there.
Go ahead and give the launch. Here it comes. Oh, God.
And you know what? It's okay if you're doing trial and error, but you care about safety and you know how to do your calculations correctly. But Jeff Henry didn't care about any of that. He was just a very passionate guy that loved making water slides, which is cool, but you should also care about safety. Even with Henry's team pushing themselves to their limits, the opening of Verrückt was pushed back to July of 2014. That being said though, Guinness Book of World Records actually named Verrückt the tallest water slide in April of that year. And around this time that it was given the title of the tallest water slide in the world, they were doing testing on the slide, and it just showed how dangerous this ride could potentially be. Rafts would often go airborne, even though they were held down with sandbags, and sometimes water rafts would just get stuck mid-ride. That's fine. That's fine. Open that shit up. Let the people go on it. It's gonna be fine. A wild bean has emerged.
You look so creepy in the light.
A hired safety consultant told Jeff Henry that this ride obviously wasn't safe, obviously needed some, major rebuilding. And they also recommended that the age to ride this ride should be over 16. But Jeff Henry was kind of like, meh, it's fine. He, didn't set an age limit. Anybody could ride the ride. Jeff Henry did decide to tear down the bottom part of the slide and rebuild it with a different angle. So hopefully it was less likely that people would go airborne at the bottom part of the ride. Not only that, but they did decide to add extra support beams at the top of the ride, and this was like metal support beams as well as netting to hopefully keep people in the ride. There was an interview by a former lifeguard that worked at Schlitterbahn, and they said that they were present for some of these initial testings, and they would later tell their loved ones that they did not think that this ride was safe and that they thought probably something bad was going to happen. And oh boy, how right they were. Let's take a moment to talk about Verrückt. It was incredibly tall, like the height of the Statue of Liberty tall. Passengers would have to walk up 264 steps. Also, passengers would get weighed at the bottom of the slide and at the top of the slide to make sure that the weight distribution was going to be accurate. The ride began with a 17-story drop, followed by a 5-story uphill, and then a final descent. The ride could go up to 68 miles an hour, and it only lasted 18 seconds. So the raft could hold 3 people per ride, and it had like a soft backing to the chair and also soft shoulder straps. And I think this was kind of a precaution to try to keep people seated in their seats if they were to go airborne. Once this ride was open to the public, it was a enormous hit. People loved that shit. Adrenaline junkies, they were like, give it to me, baby, I'm ready. And mind you, some of the test footage of, rafts going airborne were available to the public. And people would watch this and still be like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go anyway. It seems fun.
Most visitors here at Schlitterbahn plan to return for the ride. Derek Potts just caught the end of a test run. The raft slowly made it over the final hill.
They have a little net over the top, so it looks like they'll catch you if you fly off of it.
Good enough for him to let his 10-year-old daughter take the drop come opening day.
Couldn't be me, but okay, to each their own. Riders, employees, owners, they all knew the risks, but nobody put a stop to it. It was said that the 2 owners of Schlitterbahn, Kansas City would watch the ride after it was open and would see passengers going airborne, would see them hit the top netting, and just sat back and didn't do anything. In an interview with a former employee of Schlitterbahn, it was said that they had to ride Verrückt 3 times before their shift started, and I couldn't really find anything to back this up. I don't know if it's true, but if it is, I'm assuming it's because they kind of wanted to desensitize them to the risks. That's the only thing I can think of why they would make their employees do this. I'd quit on the spot. I'm not even gonna lie. I am not an adrenaline junkie. I'll go on water slides, but absolutely not. That shit, I could never. Over the next few months, there were countless injuries, and most of them were pretty mild, like concussions and back injuries, but most of them did happen when people would zoom down the ride and go airborne and hit the top netting. A few people that had ridden the ride said that the netting actually looked worn from so many people hitting it as they were going down the slide. There was one particular incident that occurred in 2016 that was extremely suspicious. A man injured his face, and management evidently told their employees exactly what to write down in their incident report in order to prevent any kind of lawsuit or even having the park and the ride shut down. Despite all of this, the countless injuries, the horror stories, Verrückt got named the Best New Water Slide of 2014 by Golden Ticket Awards. Let's fast forward to 2016 and the incident that ended Verrückt's popularity. So it was a normal late summer day, and that day Schlitterbahn was busy as usual. There was actually a free admission day for all Kansas City elected officials, and so there were lots of families there. 3 passengers made their way up the 264 steps to the top of Verrückt. That day, 3 people boarded the raft of Verrückt. 2 women and a 10-year-old boy named Caleb Schwab. Caleb was situated in the front seat of the raft, and the 2 women sat behind him. The ride went off as normal. Everything was fine and fun until they reached the top of that second hump. And as you can probably imagine, the raft did go airborne, and they hit the top of the netting, and Caleb was decapitated, and the 2 women were very badly injured. Experts later stated that the uneven weight distribution of the raft was probably what played a major part in this accident, but it was also just the way that the metal beams and netting were set up themselves. They concluded that these metal support beams and nettings were extremely dangerous, and they obviously had the force to take off limbs and kill people. All in all, they concluded that these safety measures, this netting and these metal support beams were not safe to have in the first place. Instead, the ride should have had hard restraints, like hard, almost like a roller coaster, like over the top, like hard restraints, as well as mechanisms to keep the raft hooked onto the slide, which is actually something that a lot of roller coasters use, and it keeps, everything safe and sound to the slide. Schlitterbahn, Kansas City did close for a few days, and once they did, get back to their normal operations, Verrückt was never reopened, and it was actually demolished in November of 2018. Most of the team members that worked on Verrückt and made up the plans, conceived of the idea, they were laid off, and Jeff Henry actually went into hiding, and he hasn't really spoke out that much about the incident. He did, however, speak to a few reporters, and he kind of deflected the blame, saying that there were lots of maintenance issues and communication errors, and that he didn't know that the problems that Verrückt were having were so bad. And that kind of makes sense to me. Like, if there are lots of injuries happening and you're not letting upper management know, it's going to be a problem, right? But at the same time, Jeff Henry knew the risks. He saw those rafts going airborne, and he still opened the ride. Thankfully, there was legal action taken not only against the park, but also against the key players that made Verrückt possible. The Schwab family was given $20 million, and the 2 women that were injured also were given a settlement, but it was undisclosed how much money they made from the incident. Caleb Schwab's father was actually a Kansas state representative, and he pushed extremely hard for reform after his son's death. A vote was taken and passed, and after this point, all amusement parks had to have annual inspections of their rides after this point, which thank God, because this should not have taken this long to be a thing, but things happen and we get better. Schlitterbahn, Kansas City's last season was actually in 2018 before they closed permanently. And hopefully with the closing of Schlitterbahn, the people affected by Verrückt can finally close this chapter of the book and move on and heal some of those wounds. Next, we're going to be going to Lagoon Amusement Park, and this is located about 18 miles outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. It was opened in 1896, and it first included things like bowling, dancing, music, food, and later on, they opened a miniature train, and it traveled around the entire park, which is super fun and super cute. And they also had a carousel to the mix as well. Not only that, but if visitors were sick of the loud and thrilling amusement park, they could go and take a dip in the lagoon that was located nearby. In 1921, Lagoon's most iconic attraction opened, and that was its wooden roller coaster. It stands at about 57 feet tall and it can reach speeds of up to 45 miles an hour. Today, Lagoon still has this wooden roller coaster as well as 10 other coasters and 54 other attractions. So this place is poppin', it's big. And of course, when you have a place that's been open for, over a century, there are going to be some accidents. So let's talk about some of them. The first incident we're going to be talking about is Puff the Little Fire Dragon ride. And this was kind of your run-of-the-mill, like, mini coaster for kids. And, it had its, little ups and downs, nothing too crazy. It was an April day in 1989. Puff the Little Fire Dragon ride was running as normal. A group of passengers boarded the ride, including 6-year-old Ryan Becksteed. And the ride went around twice in a loop before coming to a stop at the platform. Well, actually, the scene was a bit confusing. The ride did come to a halt at the platform, but allegedly a newer employee was working the ride, and she asked the passengers if they wanted to go around another time. Ryan was actually situated at the back end of the ride with his 2 siblings, and he had started to get up and deboard when it started up again. Ryan, having 1 foot on the platform and 1 foot in the ride, quickly tried to get back into his car before the ride started to go, but he missed his chance and he ended up falling onto the tracks below the ride. It's important to note here that the loop of this ride only was about 12 seconds. So Ryan had to somehow get from the tracks where he had just fallen onto the platform in less than 12 seconds. Ryan quickly tried to scramble his way up, and at the same time, the employee noticed what was happening and was quickly trying to pull the brake as fast as she possibly could, but it was just too late. The front car ended up striking Ryan, and he died on impact. Obviously, the onlookers and the employee herself were completely blindsided by this incident. This ride was very safe, actually, and there had been no incidents before then. It was discovered that this was the employee's first weekend on the job, so unfortunately it was just a series of very unfortunate events. The next few accidents that we're going to be talking about all occurred on different roller coasters around Lagoon Amusement Park. There are not a lot of details about the first 2 incidents I'm going to be talking about, but I will give you the details that I do have. A man was riding the wooden roller coaster in August of 1934. His name was Ernest Henry Howe. And for some reason or another, he decided to stand up during that first big incline of the coaster. And because of how gravity works, he ended up tumbling backwards and he hit a lot of the support beams and the tracks as he fell. He was pronounced dead at the scene from a fractured skull. In the late summer of 1946, an employee named James Young Hess was killed while he was working on repairing some of the scaffolding of the wooden coaster. He was actually hit by the coaster as it was passing, and he sustained fractures in his arms, legs, and his skull. He was quickly rushed to the hospital, but he did pass away a day later. And I don't know if it was like a miscommunication, if like he was supposed to wait till the ride wasn't operational, or if he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. But it just seems weird that if somebody was doing maintenance, that the coaster would also be running. I don't know. It was the 40s. In June of 1989, a 13-year-old girl named Kylie King was killed when she decided to stand up mid-ride on the wooden coaster. She was sitting in the front car, and as they were going up the second hill, she stood up because she evidently needed some air, and she did end up falling 35 feet and was killed. It was kind of puzzling to investigators at first because when they looked at the scene, her restraint bar had stayed exactly where it was. So they determined that because of the angle of the way that the seats were made, she was able to wriggle her way out from under the restraint bar, and that is how she was able to stand up. Lagoon obviously did make adjustments after this point to fix the angling of their seats to hopefully prevent something like this from happening again in the future. The last incident we're going to be talking about occurred on the Sky Ride at Lagoon Amusement Park. And a lot of different places have this ride. It's pretty common. It's just like your average ski lift, and it usually takes you from one point in the park to another, and they are relatively safe. Like, you don't hear of many incidents happening on rides like these. It was August 14th of 2021, and an unknown man boarded the Sky Ride at Lagoon, and he began to make his journey from one end of the park to another when this happened.
he doing? Why is doing like that? She's practicing? No, it's crazy.
From witness statements and from this video, it's unclear to know if he had fallen from his seat and was trying to hang on, or if he had voluntarily gotten out of his seat. We don't really know, but what we do know is that he seems relatively calm and he's not really making an effort to get back into his seat. So it's all just very strange. But unfortunately, at some point, the man did end up losing his grip and fell 50 feet to the ground below. Multiple 911 calls were placed and paramedics rushed to the scene, and he was taken to the hospital in critical condition. His family members did seem to want to kind of keep things quiet, which is entirely understandable. The man's name has never been released, but we do know that he did pass away a few days after the accident. Lagoon was not found to be at fault for this incident, as there are multiple witnesses and video evidence showing the man willingly leave his seat. You know, Lagoon does rigorous testing on this ride. Safety is one of their main focuses there, so they were not found at fault for this incident. But yeah, that is all I have for you guys. Kind of a downer, but this topic is extremely interesting. I think it's important that we know about these incidents, especially the ones that are preventable, like the last ones that I talked about. People standing up, leaving their seat. Not entirely the amusement park's fault. Maybe just be more aware. If you're gonna go to amusement parks, have fun, get your adrenaline rush, but just be careful. Know your limits, and yeah. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. Let me know if there's something you guys want me to talk about. Keep being the bad bitches that you are.